good afternoon, good evening, whatever it might be, wherever it is you are. We're back.
Morning.
This is going to be like a streaming packed week.
Damn, man, I know. Back to back.
We did one. Today we've got one. Friday we've got one.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, how are you this morning?
I am great. How are you?
Okay. Can't complain.
I was supposed to get up at 6 a.m. to go to the gym, but guess what? I did not.
What?
I mean, I woke up at 6, but I was like, my bed is too comfy. I will go to the gym later.
Man, this morning I felt that. This morning I was like, man, I do not want to get up. But the thing is, I woke up at like 4:30, and I went back to bed.
4:30? Why?
Yeah. I don't know. I just woke up like I was thirsty because it's been nice here. It's been really nice and like weather's been nice, but it's been really dry. And so I woke up. I was super, super thirsty. So I drank some water and I went back to bed, but I could not get back to sleep. And then I had to turn around and get up at 5:45 or whatever. Go to the gym.
Were you not messed up? Because doing that usually messes me up. Like if you have to get up halfway through the night for something and then you go to sleep again. Mm-hmm. You screwed up my sound again.
No, I genuinely didn't do anything. I literally have done nothing.
Yeah. So says the man who controls everything.
I promise, I didn't change a thing. Now I can't hear you at all. Now nobody can hear you at all. I mean, I can tweak the balance over here, but I can't hear you anymore. So whatever you just did, it wouldn't be morning without without audio issues. Still can't hear you, by the way. Oh no, they've muted me now. Oh, but you know what? The bot isn't running. You spoke too soon. You spoke too soon, Bolt, because I forgot to start up the bot this morning. Now it's running. Uh-oh. It will be running here in just a minute. I still can't hear you, Christos. I don't know what happened to you. Oh my goodness. Well, it's okay because for whatever reason, we're supposed to be streaming on Learn TV this morning and it's not working either. So maybe everything's just having problems today. I don't know. I can't hear you, Christos. I genuinely can't. So if you're making noise, sadly, I cannot hear you. So maybe like leave and come back. Still can't hear you. One day. Yeah, apparently not. I mean, you know. I'm not messing with him. I genuinely can't hear him. Now, it's also possible that I can't hear him. And it's just part of life, but, you know. Morning, Damien. Or afternoon, I guess. Evening for you. So, anyway, we've got a pretty busy show today. We're going to talk about Azure AD Tenants and just what they are and how to get one. And then at noon Eastern, so in about 50 minutes, the Azure Change Management folks are going to join us and give us a 15-minute power demo of their new service for change management, which is going to be super cool. And then around 1 p. Eastern, about an hour after that, we've got Lisa at the Edge coming. Lisa at the Edge is going to come talk about hybrid and Azure Stack and all sorts of cool stuff to wrap up the show today. So I think this will be pretty neat. And if anything ends up not working, we'll just go write some code. And sure, Damien, you can ask a question. Feel free. That's why we're here. So we've also got some other really cool news coming up. We're going to have there's going to be another 425 show. It's going to be EMEA time zone, so Europe, Middle East, and Asia. It's going to be EMEA time zone focus, and it's going to be IT Pro and admin focus. So for folks who want to... I can hear you.
I'm back.
By the way.
I'm back.
What did you do?
Do not pull a USB connection when you're halfway through the stream. It just killed the driver. So the driver was like, I don't see that Yeti thing. So I had to I had to reinstall it in Device Manager. It's like,
Nice.
yeah, see? Oh, I see
Well,
Damien is here, Vicious is here, morning friends, or afternoon.
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
I'm glad you're back.
Am I also mono or stereo?
Now that I don't know. I'm looking at your waveforms, and yeah, your left side is a little stronger than the right. I don't know why. Did you work out one side more than the other?
Yeah, I was doing just left side workouts yesterday.
That's fine. Just talking. I'll fix it. How about that?
Could it be the gain, or
It could just be the positioning.
The positioning sounds good out here, says Dave R4444.
Yeah. So there you go. I mean, I'll move you a little bit to the right if you prefer. You know, whatever.
I'm good. I'm
Okay.
good, my friend. All good.
Anyway, so today we're going to get into busy show today. We were talking about Azure AD Tenants, getting one if you don't have one, getting one for free if you don't have one, and like 20 different ways you can get a free one, which is cool. Azure Change Management is going to come show their stuff, and Lisa at the Edge is going to come talk about her cool new podcast, Hybrid Cloud, Azure Stack, all sorts of cool stuff. And if any of that doesn't work out, we've got plenty of code that we have to go work on anyway. So we'll fall back to that.
We will improvise today. How about that?
Yep.
We're improvising. Yes.
Anyway, so we're gonna start with tenants. Okay.
Well,
So
what is a tenant?
What is an Azure AD tenant? So you hear tenant used a lot. If you've been within 300 feet of a Microsoft employee for the past 10 years, you've heard somebody refer to a tenant. And if you ask 10 Microsoft people what tenant means, you'll get 10 different answers.
Different, yes.
And they're all very long. But sort of the net of it is, at least in the Azure AD world, is Azure AD itself is it's a directory, right? So a specific directory with a name. So
Can we say a resource? A resource in Azure plus a directory, right?
Well, it isn't a resource in Azure though, right? I mean, you don't see it. You don't have to have an Azure subscription at all to use Azure AD.
That's a very good point.
So, and hence the confusion,
Office.
right?
Yes.
So that's the thing, right? Azure AD is neither Azure nor AD, and so because of that, when people call it Azure AD, it causes a whole lot of confusion.
Yes.
So anyway, so tenant means like one of a billion different things, and it means one thing if you're a small company, and it means something totally different if you're a large company, and it means something totally different if you're an individual. So we'll start by sort of there's a clear separation between Azure AD and Azure, right? So even though it's called Azure AD, it really doesn't have anything to do with Azure. It's not an Azure resource that you deploy. It is not something that you manage necessarily as an Azure resource. It doesn't go into a specific Azure region. None of that stuff applies, right? So the fact that it's called Azure AD, honestly, I think that given the chance, they'd probably rename it. They would have picked a different name in the very beginning because it's just so confusing. So Azure AD and Azure, the only relationship between the two is that you log into Azure via Azure AD. So the trust relationship exists between Azure AD and Azure. So the only way you can log into Azure is via Azure AD. And same with Office. So Office and Azure AD are three very distinct things. So there's Office, which has your Exchange and email and Teams, all that sort of stuff, right? And it also relies on Azure AD to sign people in, to know who they are, to apply policy to whatever. But Office itself is really unrelated to Azure AD. It just happens to be that Office uses Azure AD to sign people in, right? So then we get into various other types of clouds. So there's one called GCC, which is Government Community Cloud, I think is what it stands for. And it's for like state and local government. So if your county or your city or your state or something in the United States wants to have a compliant cloud, if you want to call it that, they can use something called GCC. And GCC gives them... GCC is very much an Office construct. So that happens inside of Office. So if I have a GCC tenant, because you'll hear people say that a lot, normally what they mean is I'm using Office GCC. which is separate
Right.
from the regular commercial Office that you and I and everybody else in enterprises use. And then there are other clouds that go beyond that. The key here is that GCC, Office GCC, still uses Azure AD Commercial. So Azure AD, the same Azure AD that you and I are in at work, and the same Azure AD that I imagine most of our viewers are in, is considered Azure AD Commercial or Azure AD Global. It's just the normal one that you get.
Yep.
If you're state or local government and you're using GCC, you are also in Azure AD Commercial. So nothing really changes. Your directory will have a flag on it that says that you're this part of this government community cloud thing. But ultimately, you're still in Azure AD Commercial, right? So it still happens on the commercial side, right? That's wholly distinct, again, from Azure AD and Azure Government. So if you're using Azure Government, which is a completely different service, Azure Government uses something called Azure AD Government. And Azure AD Government is a totally separate instance of Azure AD. And it's for like federal government, U.S. federal government. Those two things don't know anything about each other. They can't talk to each other. They don't deal with each other when it comes to things like multi-tenant apps. None of that stuff stays the same. They are wholly sort of hard firewalled between them. Well, maybe not hard. That's probably too strong of a word. So if you're working with a customer, or if you are a customer who works for government and you're using something called Azure Government, you're also using Azure AD Government. But if you're using Azure Commercial, just a regular off-the-shelf Azure subscription, and if you're using a regular off-the-shelf Azure or Office GCC, then you're using Azure AD Commercial. See, I can't even say it correctly because it's that confusing, because everything has the same name. Anyway, beyond that, there are things like Azure China. And Azure China is run completely independently from regular Azure, and so that's in a wholly separate Azure environment. And it also has a wholly separate Azure AD environment just for itself in China. So a user that exists in the US does not necessarily exist in Azure China. There's no automatic linking. So the way that I can sign into an app with my corporate account that Dropbox wrote, I can do that in commercial. I can't do it in Azure China. Totally separate things. Anyway, so tenant is an extremely overloaded term, and we will try not to use it because, in my opinion, it's been used to the degree that it just doesn't have any. It just doesn't mean anything anymore. Sort of like people who use architect as a verb.
I knew you were going to go there.
It's completely lost all meaning because it's been misused so much. So tenant, if somebody
How
ever
am I
says
going to
tenant,
architect my solution?
if a Microsoft person ever talks to you about tenants, just ask them to be clear. Are you talking about Office? Are you talking about Azure AD? Are you talking about Azure itself? Like, what are you talking about? Because tenant is an extremely, extremely overloaded term.
Should we say Azure AD instance?
You can call it an
That
instance.
makes
You can
sense.
call it a directory, which I guess calling in
Okay.
Azure AD Directory is sort of like a PIN number.
Yeah, I was going to say PIN
'cause
number.
it's
That's the...
Azure Active Directory. I've been trying to refer to them as directories because directory makes it. Directory, in my mind, is very clear about what it is. It is your directory of users. It's your group of users, right?
Yeah.
I guess we could call it identity platform or something, but that just feels like a lot of syllables with very little.
Also, it's a bit overloaded because identity platform also includes B2C, which is a different type of.
Yeah, that's
So-
true.
And
That's
B2B,
true.
and B2B, and external identities, and DID. So let's not go there.
See, that's just
For now.
it's just not helping. So anyway, it just makes it worse. I
If you
mean,
came here to disambiguate the term Azure AD Tenant, I don't think you're going to walk out knowing what Azure AD Tenants are.
everybody knows Microsoft isn't necessarily the best at naming things.
At naming, yeah, we're bad.
So
Did you know we have a website for three-letter acronyms at Microsoft?
yeah, they call them TLAs. It makes it even worse.
TLAs, yeah. So you have to know what TLA is in order to be able to go and search for the site.
That's true. It's definitely not inclusive. It's definitely not inclusive at all. So anyway, today, the primary commercial tenants that you can have, commercial directories, you've got an Azure AD directory, just a normal organizational Azure AD. It's what if you use Office 365 at work, or if you use Azure at work or school or whatever, you've got an Azure AD directory. That's the primary sort of enterprise side of, I need to use my Office, I need to do whatever. There's also B2C, and B2C is a completely separate instance of a directory, and it has some extra features on top, specifically for these, business to consumer kind of scenarios. So if I'm, social login and local accounts with usernames and passwords and that sort of thing, those only exist inside of B2C, and the way that users sign into B2C is a little bit different than how they would sign into Azure AD. So the biggest ones are Azure AD Commercial, Normal, Organizational, and Azure AD B2C. We're not going to talk about B2C today because B2C you can go and deploy them all day long. But creating a directory for your users, for testing, right? Like, let's say you're a developer and you work at BigCo, and BigCo uses Office, right? And you want to test some stuff, or you want to try some stuff out. Building apps that sign users in with Azure AD, or you want to do some of the stuff that we've been doing on here. You want to write an app that integrates with Teams or Office or something. You're going to need an environment to do that in, and you could use the one you have at work. I mean, plenty of people do. But it's nice to have another option, right? It's always nice to have an extra way to have your own
free
environment.
extra stuff. I'll take it.
Yeah, have your own environment, your own directory. You can put your own users in there and do whatever you want to them. You can try out features and see how your application is going to act and whatever.
And there's a very good reason for that, right? If you have your own, you're a master of your own directory, which means that you can do stuff that in otherwise you will be restricted. MSIT, I'm looking at you.
So it's so having your own directory, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of work like soon with Azure AD or sign in or API authentication and authorization, that sort of stuff, having your own directory can be a really big help. And luckily, there are like a dozen different ways to create a directory. So we're going to look at like probably 3 or 4 different ways to do it, right? So I'm going to open up an in-private browser here.
We will include the links below on the video. So when you're watching this on YouTube, you know exactly how to get there. We'll add them on the chat as well. So if after the fact you're excited and you want to go and create your own tenant. Oh no, I said tenant.
See, right. It's hard.
Somebody mute me. Somebody mute me for the next 30 seconds. That'll be the punishment. Every time we say that word, we get muted. Anyway.
See. So Azure AD itself, there are lots of different like permutations or SKUs of Azure AD, but you can always get a free one. And a free one does all the basics. It does sign in, lets you register applications, it lets you add users, it lets you synchronize users even from on-prem or from a directory or whatever. You can do quite a bit with Azure AD Free, and if you're building a test environment or a developer environment, Azure AD Free is a great place to start because it doesn't cost you anything. You don't even have to have an Azure subscription, and you get a feel for a lot of the basics of what it means to... Oh, you're back, by the way. You get a feel for a lot of the basics of registering apps and doing all that sort of stuff.
So is this Azure.com, Azure AD, and then it takes you this page, right?
Yeah, so this is Azure.com and then Azure AD. So I'm going to do a start free here. And it says you got to create a free Azure account. So you don't have to have an Azure account to do this. And we're going to look at another way to do it. But if you start from here, then you'll have to create a free account, right? So you start a free account. I'm just going to give you, you're going to put in your email address. You're going to sign in with something.
I was going to say, before you click on the start free, there's a lot of free stuff that you get with a free Azure account. So it's not just an Azure AD. If you scroll below, you'll see that we have get $200 credit for the first 30 days. But after that, there are more than 30 services available to you for free forever. like Azure Functions and Azure Active Directory and what have you. So make sure that when you create a free account, you're aware of all these capabilities, which is fantastic.
Yep.
Right, let's go and create one.
So you need to have some kind of an account. You don't necessarily need an Azure subscription. I know it says that you do, but you need to have some kind of a Microsoft account. So it could be the account that you use for Xbox. It could be your Hotmail account, your Outlook account, whatever. You got to have some kind of. You have to have some kind of Azure. Some kind of Microsoft account of some flavor.
Yeah.
So when we do start free, you're going to put in a new email address, or you're going to use your account as you have. I've already burned all my temporary accounts.
I was going to say, do you even have any accounts left?
So I can't do that anymore, but where we're going to go from here, you'll see immediately after. So let's go over to the Azure portal. So just portal.azure.com. And I'm going to sign in with my personal account.
One of many.
And by signing in here, let me find my phone. I gotta approve this.
Is this going to be on your Surface phone or the other phone?
I don't know. Whatever phone buzzes first and is closest at hand. That's the one I usually use.
I like that approach. It's very deterministic.
So we get signed in.
Do you have to carry all your phones with you when you leave the house?
I never leave the house. Problem solved, right?
No, that's a very good point.
I just carry a purse for just that reason.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
So I'm going to create a resource, and this is just the same normal Azure create a resource thing, which again makes it more confusing because you're not actually creating a resource. So we're going to create a resource, and we're going to call it Azure Active Directory. And it should show up here in your autocomplete list, and we're going to click Create. And when we create one, we're going to give it the name of our organization. So what should we call this organization?
Big Bad Card Company. What's the one they usually use?
Big Bad Biz. I may have already used this one. Big Bad Business Cards Inc. And we'll call this Big Bad Biz Cards on Microsoft.com. So this is your sort of global directory name. You can add your own domains later. So we'll start with. We'll start with this name and United States.
Yep.
Now, United States is, in my case, where the data is going to live, but the service itself is global. So when you create, so this is not. You'll notice this doesn't have like Azure AD region or Azure regions like East US or Central US, anything like that. These are countries, and a lot of this is driven by where does your data need to reside. So I'm going to choose United States because that's where I live, and I'm going to create it.
There's a lot of countries over there. That's for data sovereignty, right?
Yep. So the data itself will be somewhere, but the service itself that's in the endpoints that sign you in and that lets you get tokens and everything else, all that is distributed around the world. So you don't have to worry about, you're not choosing a region to say, oh, I have to deploy this into Azure East US 2 or whatever, because like we said before, it doesn't have anything to do with Azure really. And Bolt says, forget about wasting a GUID. I'm going to waste an entire domain. You know what? We'll delete this directory when I'm done. So this takes about a minute to get a directory created. And it'll be a completely empty directory. There won't be anything in it except for me as the original user or the user that created it. I'll be the only person in there. There won't be any data. There won't be any services. There's no Office. There's no Azure. There's nothing associated with this directory at all. It is literally just going to be an empty directory.
Yep.
And yes, I wish we could automate this, Bolt. I can't say much more than that, but just know that
we're bound by.
I have been beating that drum.
Silence.
I have been beating that drum for quite a while. So then it says click here to manage your new tenant. So that's one thing we could do. You could click this link. The other thing you could do is remember this name, this big bad bizcards.onmicrosoft.com. You can also get here very quickly. So, and this works regardless of whether or not you just create it or not. So you can go to portal.azure.com / the name of the directory that you want to join, or the name of the directory you want to manage, or you can also go directly to the Azure AD management portal, which is pretty much the same thing but trimmed down with aad.portal.azure.com. But the key here is that you always have your, you can always put a directory name at the end, and that way your directory will it'll set your context as soon as you come in.
Sweet.
Yep. Okay, what's going on with my mouse? See, now my mouse isn't working. Maybe it needs to be charged? I don't know.
Battery, yeah, mouse.
You know what? Some days it feels like the entire world is... Every
falling
piece
apart?
of technology is conspiring against all of us. Well, I think the ball
Well-
is dirty.
Oh, I don't even know. Like, he's not talking about the ball underneath. I don't know how many of our people here in the audience remember those amazing mice they had to clean out every 2 days because it would catch gaff inside the ball. He's got one of the weird ones.
No, it's not weird. It's a trackball.
Yeah, I don't know how you can be productive with that.
Driving
Yes.
a track, well, I can't be productive when my battery's dead, apparently. Using a trackball is like driving a stick. Nobody will steal it because they don't know how to use it.
People will just come into your house and they will leave money behind because they will feel bad for you for using a trackball mouse.
Yeah, they'll be like, man, this guy, what a weirdo. Using this weird mouse. What else is he
Yeah.
doing that's weird, you know?
It's
So,
working for identity, man. He needs saving.
yeah, an identity guy. So, anyway,
Okay.
let me,
Yeah.
this is ridiculous. I can't believe I got to do this again today. But anyway, let me get this plugged
Can you
in.
not charge and work at the same time? This is one of these weird ones that you have to turn upside down.
No,
like
I'm
the
charging
Apple?
it. No, it's charged.
You know the Apple
It's charged.
mouse?
Oh, no, it's not like that. It's charging. Okay.
Cool.
Okay, so anyway, you can go directly to one of these, and it'll take you directly into that context. So, if you're using multiple things, like especially if you work in consulting, you may have people adding you to their directory, so you can help them with
Multiple.
their Azure or do whatever, and it can be a real pain to constantly go up to this little thing in the corner and like, oh, I want to use this directory, so you have to change your directory and switch them and do all that. So this is, of course, one way you could do it. So you could always come in here and see your directories and choose the one that you want to choose, right? Or you could just go directly in the URL to portal.azure.com / the name of the directory context you would like to be in. So here we are.
Lovely. Cool.
And it'll tell you up here in the corner, it tells you which directory you're in. So you've got it right up
Yes.
here, Big Bad BizCards Inc. And if you hover over it, you'll get a little bit of extra info like the domain and the directory name and the directory ID, whatever. And if we look here in our directory and subscription filter, and we look under all directories, there it is, Big Bad BizCards. You can star it and get to it fast or whatever, right? So it's kind of a pain to use the switcher. So if you're constantly back and forth to the same one, it can definitely be helpful to just use the domain directly. So it works with B2C too. So if you're using B2C stuff, it works the same way. Now, this Azure subscription, I don't have any. There's nothing in here. Like I don't have an actual Azure subscription that's linked to this. Linked to this directory. So if I go to something like virtual machines, it's going to say, "Hey, you don't have a subscription. Sorry." But what we can do is manage Azure Active Directory. So go to View.
Perfect.
And now we have an Azure AD directory. So it's Azure AD.
Which is perfect because it means that you might not get charged for spinning up resources by mistake on a directory that you don't want to.
So you've got a free directory. It has a tenant ID. It's got your primary domain. You can come and look at things like custom domain names if you want to add one here. So if I wanted to add a custom domain of, bolt.io, I could do that. And when I add this domain, I have to go do some DNS stuff to register it. And then now I can use that. So you don't have to use this one. You could use portal.azure.com / bolt.io, right? And it would take you to the same
Very
place.
nice.
You can set up things like Azure AD Connect for synchronizing users from on-prem, so you can download it. You download an agent. That agent sits on your network and it uploads all your users from AD. Or you can just go start creating users. So if you don't have like an on-premises domain or anything like that, or Active Directory on-prem, you can just come in here and start creating users, right?
And there's
So
bulk options as well, which is great.
Yep. So I could create Christos. I could give him a name.
Oh man, I'm gonna be part of this directory. Please don't add me. I don't want yet another one.
Well, this would be a local user, so you would never see
Fine.
this unless you signed in. But we give him a password. We can add him in some groups. We can set where he's going to be using it, and typical directory kind of stuff, right? Just regular user stuff. We can do all this. This is all part of Azure AD Free. You can also invite users from other places. So if you want to invite people from the place that you work, like maybe you want to invite your work account because this is going to be your dev account, you could invite your work user to come in and be able to sign in and do stuff like that. I don't know I guess we've talked about B2B in the past, but that's essentially what it is. Another really cool thing, big thing that is, because we just recently announced things like FIDO support, if you want to come in here and test that out, like if you want to try with your own FIDO key, for example, or something like that, here's where you can do it. So you can come in here and set up things like under authentication methods. You can come in here and say, hey, yeah, I want to turn on FIDO security keys so I can test it before I go and try to do that with all of my users, right? So you do things like self-service. Yep, everybody can do it. Sure, cool. So let's save that. And now we can go register with a FIDO security key. We can also enable authenticator. So like MFA and all that sort of stuff, all that stuff's free. And it comes along with it. So
And as a developer, you don't have to worry about implementing that because the libraries will allow you to benefit from this configuration. So if I were to authenticate apps against this solution, then it would automatically be available to me. How awesome is that?
So this is all configuration. Some things require licenses and require payment, stuff like conditional access. Conditional access is a premium feature, so you have to have Azure AD Premium to do that. So you can't really test that one unless you feel like buying it, but you do get a pretty strong list of features right out of the box, and it's free.
Well, we'll show them a way to test conditional access there, right?
Yeah, we will. But you can register an application. So you want to create a new app reg to go and do something. We'll call this, my test app. Everything that you're used to seeing us do here, localhost 5001, sign in OIDC or whatever, right?
We had a question today. We had a question about, now you're talking about it. Sign out URIs. Do you know if anything has changed on the .NET space and we need to not use the sign out OIDC? Microsoft Identity.web?
The sign out path in the app, the Microsoft account or Microsoft Identity /account /sign out or whatever that is.
Yeah.
That is for invoking a sign out. So the sign out OIDC, I don't think you have to use it, but we can check it. But we can check and see.
Sure.
But yeah, so we can register an app just like you would expect. You get all the things like authentication to add platforms. You can use Pixie. You can set up API permissions of things you need to access. You can expose APIs, all that sort of stuff, right? So none of these features change. If you're a developer, none of the features change. The big changes with premium are things like conditional access and some of the administrative stuff. So you might be saying, I want to test that, or I need to test that because I've got a bug that has something specific to do with people who are using conditional access for MFA or something like that, right? So I'm going to close this window. I'm going to close this one. There are two ways to get a developer subscription. So one of them is called let me get the link up here. One of them is called the M365 Developer Program. And that developer program is all about, if I can find the link, I know I just had it up here a second ago.
We have an AK.ms, right?
Well, we did. I don't know where it is now. But, dev.
I'll find it. I'll find it while you're searching for it. You got it?
So here's the link. And this lets you do something called the M365 Developer Program. And this gives you a new Azure AD directory, but it also gives you a bunch of other stuff. And it's totally free. So you can come out here and join this for free. You can use the link that we just gave you, or you can just search for M365 Dev Program, and you can go out and use that immediately. So when we join this program, let me do this I'll do it from another private window. When we join this program, you're going to have to sign in with some kind of an account, personal, work, or school, whatever, it doesn't really matter. So let's join this account, or let's join the developer program today.
Can you use a school account, a school or a corporate account? I don't think you can use that. You have to. It has to be an Outlook or a Hotmail or something like that, right? Do you remember?
I think you can use a worker school account.
Okay.
Pretty sure you can. And when you get out here, you're going to have a button for... When you get out here, you're going to get a button for adding a directory. I've already created one, so I guess I can't delete it. I'm in private though. I don't know why. I don't know what account it sees. Oh, I must have signed in somewhere. I did. And when you create this, it's going to create a whole lot more than just a new directory. So you notice it says it's a renewable E5. So E5 is sort of one of the high SKUs, one of the high packages for Microsoft. It's called Microsoft 365, Office 365.
The Platinum Edition. How about that?
The
Should give it a
E5
name.
Platinum Edition, yeah. So the E5 gives you a ton of stuff, right? So if we go look at Microsoft 365 E5, if we go look at what's in here, oh man, I'm in a private window, so like all the ads are coming in. If we go look at E5, we'll do a compare. That's probably the best thing. So you get
You can enable your ad blockers on your private window, right?
Yeah, I just haven't, So with E5, which is a $60 a month thing that you're going to get for free, you get like the Office apps themselves, Word, PowerPoint, Exchange, all that sort of stuff. You get your email, you get meetings with Teams. You don't get phone calling, like you can't call a PSTN like a telephone number, but you can call other people on Teams. You get SharePoint and Yammer, because clearly that's great if you're an individual.
Yep.
But so you get pretty much everything that comes along with. It's pretty much the best of everything that we have, right?
Yeah.
Work management, Power Apps, and To Do, and all that sort of stuff. You get all that for free as part of this. And then you can even do things like device management. So like if you look at device management, you don't get a Windows license, but you do get things like Intune, so you can manage Windows devices. So if you want to test out applying policies to a device, or like I had a customer who was using Windows 10 IoT Enterprise, which is basically just Windows 10 Enterprise. And we used a test tenant to figure out what kind of policies and things that we needed to apply, because if we screwed something up, we could just trash the whole thing and start over. Things like Autopilot, which are super, super cool. So you get all of that as part of the subscription. Then if we look at identity and access management, you get things like Windows Hello. So like you can do Windows Hello on your PC, and you get Azure AD P1 and Azure AD P2. So the P1 and P2 give you things like conditional access and credential protection and all like a ton of different things, all as part of it, right? Let me go find the list here. This is not what I was looking for. Pricing, maybe? Is that where it was? No. Marketing sheets are not very helpful. So P2 is over here on the far right. So you'll notice you get things like password protection, all that sort of stuff happens. Cloud app discovery, which is really cool. But then things like Azure AD Join. So if you want to test things like Azure AD Join, of joining a machine instead of domain joining it, but joining to Azure AD, so you can test things like seamless sign-on and stuff like that. That all comes along with it. App proxy, which is really good if you're migrating old apps. I know we had Richard on here a few months ago to talk about app proxy quite a bit. You get some cool stuff with groups, like you can assign groups to roles, but you get conditional access and identity protection. Those are the big ones. And PIM. PIM is probably one of the biggest ones that a lot of customers are really into, where nobody has standing access and you just elevate when you need to. So Nobody's an Azure administrator. In order to be an Azure administrator, somebody's got to approve it or something, right? So that's cool.
Yep.
It's cool from that regard. But the other cool thing that nobody talks about is the fact that you can use that with your own apps. So you could elevate into a new role, into a privileged role. You could elevate into that on demand as you need to, and it would be a role for your application instead of like an Azure role or an Azure AD role. So it's really cool, but it's really cool to be able to test this. So anyway, so you go out here and you sign up for this thing for free, and you get all this stuff, and you get it for 90 days. So those 90 days that you get are for you to test, do whatever you need to do. If you continue to use it, you can renew it, right? So if you come out here and you've configured all this stuff, you're not going to be guaranteed to lose it after 90 days, because if you are using it, you can come out and renew that, renew it every so often. So if you're using it on an ongoing basis, you can renew it. If you're not using it, then it will get deleted, which is fine anyway, because who wants to keep that kind of stuff around forever?
And
Well, if you're not
Bolt is
using-
saying that he's done a POC with PIM that grants
Oh, yeah.
to Graph, which is fantastic. Well done,
Yep.
Bolt.
In fact, we've
Ahead
got a
of us.
project. We've got a project on our backlog for a PIM portal, because we have lots of customers who are asking to
Yeah,
integrate that. with their
that's a
existing
backlog.
things.
That's some backlog over there that we have.
I know.
Right.
So-
we got M365, right? We got the Dev Essentials kind of a thing, or no, we went through the Azure free stuff, right? What's the other way to get an Azure Active Directory?
So one more note on here. The extra thing you get, so you get Office and you get Azure AD Premium. If you don't have a bunch of users, there's also a sample data pack. So you can
Nice, yes.
install certain groups of data. So like I've already added the users. That adds 16 users, gives them mailboxes, whatever. So I've added my 16 users. We can also add fake mail. So if we want to add fake mail, we can do that too. So we click mail and events and then wait about 5 minutes and then we'll have mail and calendar. It's a bunch of fake mail and calendar data for your users. And the same with SharePoint. So with SharePoint, they've got sample packs so you can see different types of sites and whatever, which is really helpful if you're doing development because you don't have to, if you're just doing work against somebody's mailbox or against their calendar, you don't want to have to go and put a bunch of fake stuff in and sign in as those users and everything else. So instead, these sample data packs to do that for you so you can get up and going with Graph very quickly. So you can use this for free. You can go out and get one of these for free. All you need to do is sign in with your Microsoft account and you can do this all day for free. The last way to get one is if you have MSDN. So if you have
Yes.
a Visual Studio, is it still called MSDN? Do they even still call it that anymore? I don't know.
I think so.
So if you go to
We can look
my.visual, if you go to my.visualstudio.com, and if you have MSDN from school or from work, or Visual Studio from school or for work, you get various benefits. One of the benefits you get, in addition to things like Azure credits, you can get $150 a month with Azure, you also get an M365 developer subscription. So you get exactly what we just looked at, but the advantage here is you don't have to worry about renewing it. So you could have one and have it, have it forever if you want to call it that, right? So if I come and look at my dashboard signed in as me at work, right? So this is my work account that's got Visual Studio assigned to it. You'll notice this is a new one that I created. Nothing too crazy there. It's a 90-day one, and we created it yesterday when we were doing a different event. But I've also got one that just says active. It doesn't have an expiration date. The expiration date is really like when your Visual Studio ends, right? Or BSD guy who pays out of pocket for his MSDN subscription, which is dedication, I must say, because I don't know how much they cost, but last time I looked, they were quite pricey.
Yeah.
So your MSDN one, the one that you get with MSDN or with your Visual Studio benefits, you don't have to renew it. It'll renew automatically as you renew your Visual Studio. So as you renew your Visual Studio or MSDN subscription, then this one will renew as well, and it won't go away as long as you're an active subscriber. What's nice about that is you could actually do some pretty long-term stuff. I use I use some personal email for mine, right? I use it as a dev environment, but also keep other stuff out there too. And so if you're an MSDN subscriber, you come out, you do it the exact same way. You click activate, wherever it is. Here it is. You click activate. It takes you over to the thing, and then you'll have a button here that says create a subscription, and that's it. Once you've created it, now you've got one, and then we click go to subscription, and we can go right in and start working on it. So you notice it even has my administrator up here, and so I can use my administrator password if I remember it, which doesn't look promising at the moment.
I thought you were using password managers. What happened to you?
I don't use them on these because these are always so because otherwise every time I go to a Microsoft site, it'll say, hey, you've got one of 8 bazillion different, 1,000 different passwords. Which one would you like to use here? So I just kind of gave up on password managers for Microsoft stuff. But
So you just use the same password everywhere. Okay, thank you.
no, I don't use the same one everywhere. But
I'm just messing with you.
so anyway, so this is a surefire, really quick way to get a directory. You can go out and do one for free. You don't have to pay anybody any money. If you have MSDN, you can get one here, and you can add a bunch of extra data to it. Of course, you do that for free too. And once you have this, you can do things like create an edge profile for it. So if you're going to be using it a lot, for example, you could always use, like if I was going to use this directory for a lot of stuff, I could create an edge profile because it's just a normal Azure AD. There's nothing special about it. And if I took this one, we could go look at it in the Azure AD portal just like we would anything else, right? So if we go here, we go to login.microsoft. Portal.azure.com, aad.portal.azure.com, and I use this bent spoon one that we've got, then we'll be able to get in and see all the different things about it. It's Azure AD Premium P2, which of course we're not paying for. We've got the users in here that I use, and we have a regular Azure AD, but we can do things like come to security, and we can set up conditional access because now we're licensed. So the new policy button is up. So now we've got a license for this. We can create policies, and you get 25 licenses. So you can have up to 25 users in your dev tenant, which 25.
That's amazing.
25 is a pretty sweet number. Pretty nice number for what you get out of it. So yeah, so that's a directory in a nutshell. And when people say directory or when they say tenant, if they're talking about Azure AD, they typically just mean the directory. Now, the thing to notice is, if I click this over here, these are the other directories that my user account has access to. But I don't have any subscriptions, so it says there are no subscriptions in this directory. So your Azure subscriptions have to be linked to a directory, because otherwise, how would we know who can sign in to your Azure subscription, right? I can sign into Azure and I see my subscriptions, but Christos can't see mine if he's not a member of my directory. Same with you. So if you've got an Azure subscription at work, you can sign in and look at that subscription and do stuff to it. But like I couldn't because I don't work and I don't exist in your directory. And so Azure subscriptions have to be linked to a directory in order for them to be able to sign in users, and for you to be able to assign user as an owner or to give them rights or something like that in your permission. But you can also change them. So the one last thing we'll look at, I'm going to go to the Azure Portal again. So I'm in the Azure Portal, and let's change our directory to one that actually has an Azure subscription on it. So I'm going to use this one because this one has my... So this has an Azure subscription. If we go look at Azure, if we go look at subscriptions, you'll notice we've got these 4 subscriptions here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to click one, let's see, let me use one that doesn't have much in it. If we were to choose a subscription, so this is just Azure Portal subscriptions, you see this change directory?
Yep.
And now all the other directories that you are a member of, you can move this Azure subscription into a different directory, which can be very, very helpful when you're doing mergers and acquisitions, or if you bought another company, or if you have to, if you want to migrate, if you have a dev subscription and you want to test certain things like managed identities, for example, if you want to test it with your own directory, then moving your subscriptions, your Azure subscriptions, and linking them to your dev directory can be pretty helpful, because now you can create managed identities, you can test them, you can create secure Kubernetes clusters that use service principles, like all that sort of stuff starts to light up, because now you have total control over the directory that's linked to that specific Azure subscription. So this, I remember historically too, this was pretty painful to do, and it's gotten much easier. So if you need to change it, you can come out here and change it. In fact, we could even change this to like Big Bad Biz Cards, the one that we just created, and then we'd be able to assign users from that specific place. So they're related, but they are wholly separate. And so our Big Bad Biz Cards, our Bent Spoon, those don't have any Azure subscriptions associated with them, but they're still Azure AD, and we can still go and manage them just like we would any other Azure AD resource. So we don't have to have any sort of hard distinction between those.
Should we mention Dev Essentials before we wrap it up?
I don't know what Dev Essentials is, so maybe you should.
So if you go to visualstudio.microsoft.com/dev Dash Essentials.
Dev Essentials. Okay.
That takes you to it's a slimmed down kind of a program that you can activate, so you can get a lot of things for free. And it also comes with free training. It also comes with free Azure credits. It comes with free software and third-party affiliates. It also comes with subscriptions to Pluralsight and I think it's Pluralsight Premium and LinkedIn Premium for 1 month. And it's free, so you don't have to worry about that. It also comes with a free Azure account. So you get credits and an Azure AD directory. There you go. I did not say tenant. Haha.
Yeah, that's cool. It's awesome.
So it's another great solution. Obviously, it's not as fully featured as MSDN, but it gives you some free stuff. So I think it's another good way to get started if you don't know and if you don't want to spend any of your own hard-earned cash.
All right, well, cool. Well, hey, let's take a quick break. I think our friends from Azure Change Management have arrived, so let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.